The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Pendleton as Sergeant First Class Maria Rodriguez adjusted her combat boots for what would be her final patrol. At 28 years old, she had already served 3 tours overseas and earned the respect of every Marine under her command. Her dark eyes held the quiet determination that had carried her through countless dangerous missions, and her steady hands had saved more lives than she could count. Maria came from a family of service members. Her father had served in Vietnam, her brother in Iraq, and now she carried on the tradition with honor and distinction. Growing up in a small Texas town, she had always dreamed of serving her country, but she never imagined she would become one of the most decorated female Marines in her unit. The base buzzed with activity as preparations began for a critical humanitarian mission. Intelligence reports indicated that a remote village in Afghanistan was under siege by enemy forces, and civilians needed immediate evacuation. The mission was dangerous, with narrow mountain roads and the constant threat of improvised explosive devices. But Maria had volunteered without hesitation. As she checked her equipment one final time, her closest friend and fellow Marine, Corporal James Mitchell, approached with concern written across his face. He had served alongside Maria for 2 years and knew her better than most. Something felt different about this mission, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what was troubling him. "Rodriguez, you don't have to take point on this one," James said quietly, adjusting his own gear. "You've done enough dangerous runs this month. Let someone else handle the front position." Maria looked at him with a slight smile, the same expression she wore before every mission. "These people are counting on us, Mitchell. I've studied the route more than anyone else, and I know those mountain roads like the back of my hand. Besides, my team needs someone they trust leading them through this." The convoy consisted of 4 armored vehicles, each carrying essential supplies and medical equipment for the evacuation. Maria would lead the first vehicle, navigating the treacherous terrain while maintaining communication with the base. Her vehicle carried 2 medics, a communications specialist, and enough medical supplies to treat dozens of wounded civilians. As the team gathered for their final briefing, the commanding officer emphasized the importance of the mission. The village had been cut off from aid for weeks, and satellite imagery showed that enemy forces were closing in. Time was running short, and this might be their only chance to save the trapped civilians. Maria studied the mission parameters one last time, memorizing every detail of the route and potential danger zones. She had an uncanny ability to spot trouble before it found them, a skill that had kept her team safe on numerous occasions. Her intuition had never failed her, and her fellow Marines had come to rely on her judgment completely. The armored vehicles roared to life as the convoy prepared to depart. Maria took her position in the lead vehicle, her hand steady on the wheel despite the gravity of the situation. She thought briefly of her family back home, her mother who worried constantly, and her young niece who looked up to her as a hero. As they rolled through the base gates, Maria felt the familiar mixture of adrenaline and focused calm that came with every dangerous mission. She had no way of knowing that this journey would test her courage in ways she had never imagined, or that her actions in the hours to come would inspire hundreds of Marines and touch the hearts of people around the world. The dusty road stretched ahead, winding through barren hills toward the distant mountains. Maria pressed forward with the determination that had defined her entire military career, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead in service of those who needed her protection. 3 hours into the mission, the convoy had made good progress through the winding mountain roads. Maria maintained constant radio contact with her team in the base, reporting their position every 15 minutes. The landscape around them was harsh and unforgiving, with steep cliffs on one side and deep ravines on the other. The first sign of trouble came when their communications specialist, Private Davis, detected unusual radio chatter in the area. Enemy forces were moving closer to their route than intelligence had predicted. Maria made the quick decision to alter their path, taking a more dangerous but less predictable route through a narrow canyon pass. "All units, this is Rodriguez." She spoke into her radio with calm authority. "We're taking the alternate route through Eagle Canyon. Stay tight and watch for movement on the ridges above us." The canyon was a natural choke point, exactly the kind of place where ambushes occurred, but Maria's tactical experience told her it was their best option. The main route was likely already compromised, and speed was more important than safety at this point. Every minute they delayed meant more danger for the trapped civilians. As they navigated the narrow canyon road, Maria's sharp eyes caught something that made her blood run cold. Fresh tire tracks in the dust, too recent to be from their own vehicles. Enemy forces had been through this area recently, possibly within the last hour. She immediately radioed the information to her team while scanning the rocky walls above them. Suddenly, the quiet afternoon erupted into chaos. The sharp crack of sniper fire echoed through the canyon as bullets struck the armored plating of the lead vehicle. Maria instinctively swerved to avoid the incoming fire while shouting orders to her team through the radio. Contact front. Sniper fire from the east ridge.
All vehicles maintain spacing and keep moving.
The convoy pushed forward under fire, with Maria expertly maneuvering her vehicle through the dangerous terrain, while enemy bullets struck the rocks around them. Her years of training kicked in as she simultaneously drove, communicated with her team, and assessed the tactical situation. Behind her, the second vehicle carrying medical supplies took a direct hit to its front tire. The driver struggled to maintain control as the vehicle began to swerve dangerously close to the cliff edge. Without hesitation, Maria made a split-second decision that would change everything. She slammed on her brakes and threw her vehicle into reverse, positioning herself between the damaged vehicle and the sniper positions. Her armored truck absorbed the incoming fire meant for the vulnerable medical transport, buying precious time for the driver to regain control. "Rodriguez, what are you doing?" James's voice crackled through the radio from the second vehicle. "Get out of there!" But Maria was already moving. She grabbed her rifle and emergency medical kit, preparing to exit her vehicle to provide covering fire for the damaged transport. Her team members tried to stop her, knowing how exposed she would be outside the armored protection of their vehicle. "Someone needs to get those medical supplies through," she said firmly, checking her weapon one final time. "Those civilians are depending on us, and I'm not about to let them down." The canyon walls seemed to close in around them as enemy fire intensified. Maria could see muzzle flashes from at least 3 different positions on the ridges above. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, but her resolve never wavered. She had made a promise to bring help to those trapped civilians, and she intended to keep that promise no matter what the cost. Maria burst from her vehicle with practiced precision, immediately taking cover behind a large boulder while laying down suppressive fire toward the enemy positions. Her accurate shots forced the snipers to take cover, giving the damaged vehicle precious seconds to maneuver to safety. "Davis, get on the radio and call for air support," she shouted to her communications specialist while changing magazines. "Tell them we need immediate extraction assistance at grid coordinates 77 Alpha." The young private's hands shook as he worked frantically with the radio equipment. This was his first real combat situation, and the intensity was overwhelming. But Maria's calm leadership gave him the confidence he needed to complete his task. From her position behind the rock, Maria could see that the damaged vehicle had managed to pull into a small alcove where it would be protected from sniper fire. But the convoy was now split, with 2 vehicles ahead and 2 behind, making them vulnerable to a coordinated attack. Suddenly, a new threat emerged. The distinctive sound of rocket-propelled grenades whistled through the air, striking the canyon wall just above Maria's position. Rock fragments rained down as she pressed herself against the boulder, debris cutting her face and hands. "RPGs in the canyon," she reported through her radio while wiping blood from a cut above her left eye. "All units, we need to move now before they get our range." But as Maria prepared to return to her vehicle, she spotted something that made her heart sink. A small group of enemy fighters had positioned themselves on the canyon floor ahead, blocking the convoy's escape route. They had walked directly into a carefully planned ambush. The enemy had chosen their position perfectly. The narrow canyon walls prevented the vehicles from turning around, and the fighters ahead blocked any forward movement. Behind them, more enemy forces were likely moving to complete the trap. Maria's mind raced through their options. Air support was at least 20 minutes away, and they couldn't wait that long in their exposed position. The medical supplies in the convoy were desperately needed by the trapped civilians, and every minute they delayed meant more innocent lives at risk. Making a decision that would define her legacy, Maria began moving from rock to rock, working her way toward the enemy positions that blocked their path. Her plan was dangerous beyond measure, but it was their only chance to break through the ambush and complete their mission. "Rodriguez, where are you going?" James called out desperately through the radio.
"Get back to the vehicle."
"I'm clearing the path," Maria replied with grim determination.
"Keep the convoy ready to move."
"When I give the signal, punch through fast and don't look back." Her fellow Marines watched in amazement and terror as she advanced under fire, using her superior marksmanship and tactical knowledge to systematically eliminate the enemy fighters blocking their escape route. Each shot was precise and calculated, and she moved with the fluid grace of a warrior who had found her calling. But the enemy had more fighters than anticipated. As Maria engaged the first group, additional enemy forces appeared on the canyon walls above, raining down automatic weapon fire into the narrow space where she fought. The situation was becoming impossible, even for someone with her exceptional skills. Despite the overwhelming odds, Maria continued her advance. She had made a promise to those trapped civilians, and she would keep that promise even if it cost her everything. Her courage in that moment would be remembered by every Marine who witnessed it, a shining example of the honor and sacrifice that defined their brotherhood. As Maria advanced through the deadly crossfire, her tactical brilliance became evident to everyone watching. She used the rocky terrain to her advantage, moving from cover to cover with an efficiency that spoke to years of training and natural ability. Each position she took allowed her to engage different enemy fighters while minimizing her exposure to return fire. Her rifle spoke with deadly accuracy as she systematically eliminated the threats blocking the convoy's path. The first enemy fighter fell to a precise shot at nearly 200 meters. The second tried to reposition, but Maria anticipated his movement, placing her shot exactly where he would emerge from cover. Behind her, the convoy waited in tense anticipation. The drivers kept their engines running while the other Marines provided what covering fire they could from their protected positions. Everyone knew that Maria was buying them precious time with her own life, and the weight of that sacrifice pressed heavily on every heart. "She's actually doing it," whispered one of the medics in disbelief. "She's clearing the entire position by herself." But just as victory seemed within reach, disaster struck. A hidden enemy fighter, concealed in a crevice high above the canyon floor, had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. His rocket-propelled grenade streaked down toward Maria's position with deadly precision. The explosion shattered the afternoon silence like thunder. Rock and debris filled the air as the blast echoed off the canyon walls. When the dust settled, Maria lay motionless behind a pile of rubble, her rifle several feet away from her outstretched hand. "Rodriguez is down!" James screamed into his radio, his voice cracking with emotion. "I repeat, Rodriguez is down. We need immediate medical assistance." The convoy medics wanted desperately to reach her, but enemy fire still rained down from the remaining positions. Maria had cleared the path ahead, but she had paid the ultimate price for their freedom. Her sacrifice had opened the route to the trapped civilians, but she would never see the completion of their mission. As if sensing the gravity of the moment, the enemy fire began to slacken. Perhaps even they recognized the extraordinary courage they had just witnessed. The remaining fighters started to withdraw, unwilling to face the fury of Marines who had just watched their beloved leader fall. James couldn't contain himself any longer. Despite the obvious danger, he abandoned his vehicle and sprinted across the open ground toward Maria's position. Other Marines followed, their training forgotten in the face of their desperate need to reach their fallen comrade. When they reached her, Maria was still breathing, but barely. The explosion had caused massive internal injuries and blood pooled beneath her body. Her face was pale but peaceful, and her eyes remained focused and alert despite her critical condition. Did we get through?" she whispered weakly as James knelt beside her. "The medical supplies, the civilians." "The path is clear, Maria," James replied, tears streaming down his face as he applied pressure to her wounds. "You did it. You cleared the way for everyone." A slight smile crossed Maria's lips as she heard the convoy vehicles moving forward behind them. Even in her final moments, her only concern was for the mission and the innocent lives depending on their success. The medics worked frantically to stabilize her condition, but they all knew the injuries were too severe. As the convoy continued toward the trapped village, Maria was carefully loaded into one of the medical vehicles. Her sacrifice had ensured the success of their humanitarian mission, but the cost had been higher than anyone could have imagined. The Marines who witnessed her courage that day would carry her memory with them forever, a reminder of what true heroism looked like in the face of impossible odds. The helicopter evacuation came too late. Despite the medic's best efforts and the rapid response from the base medical team, Maria's injuries proved too severe to overcome. She passed away during the flight back to the military hospital, her hand held gently by James, who refused to leave her side. The news of her death spread quickly through Camp Pendleton, creating a wave of grief that touched every corner of the base. Maria Rodriguez had been more than just a fellow Marine to her comrades. She had been a symbol of everything they aspired to be. Her courage, dedication, and ultimate sacrifice represented the very best of military service. But the story of her heroism was far from over. The humanitarian mission she had died to protect was completed successfully. The medical supplies reached the trapped village just in time, saving dozens of civilian lives, including several children who would have died without immediate medical intervention. The convoy's successful passage through the canyon had been purchased with Maria's life, but her sacrifice had meaning beyond measure. Back at the base, preparations began for a memorial service that would honor her memory in a way befitting her extraordinary service. Word of her courage had reached the highest levels of military command, and plans were already underway for her to receive the Medal of Honor posthumously. Her family arrived from Texas 3 days later, devastated by their loss but immensely proud of their daughter's heroism. Maria's mother, Rosa Rodriguez, was a strong woman who had worried every day about her daughter's safety, but had never tried to discourage her from serving her country. She always told me that if something happened to her, she wanted it to be while she was helping others. Rosa said quietly as she stood beside her daughter's flag-draped coffin. She lived her whole life putting other people first. And I guess that's how she chose to leave this world too. The base chaplain, Father McKenna, spent hours with the family preparing for the service. He had known Maria personally and had been impressed by her combination of fierce warrior spirit and gentle compassion. She had often volunteered at the base's community outreach programs, working with military families and helping new recruits adjust to military life. Maria had this incredible ability to make everyone around her better. Father McKenna reflected, she didn't just serve her country with distinction. She served her fellow Marines with love and dedication that inspired everyone who knew her. As news of her story spread beyond the military community, Maria became a symbol of heroism and sacrifice that resonated with people across the nation. Letters poured in from citizens who had been moved by her story, expressing gratitude for her service and condolences for her family's loss. A Gold Star mother from Missouri wrote to express how Maria's story had helped her understand the meaning behind her own son's sacrifice. A group of elementary school students from California sent drawings and letters thanking Maria for protecting people she had never met. Veterans from previous wars wrote to share how her courage reminded them of comrades they had lost and heroes they had known. The impact of her sacrifice rippled outward in ways that no one could have anticipated. Maria Rodriguez had given her life in service to others, but her story would continue to inspire acts of courage and selflessness for generations to come. Her legacy was being written not just in military records, but in the hearts of everyone who heard about her extraordinary final mission. The day of Maria's memorial service dawned clear and bright, with not a single cloud in the California sky. Camp Pendleton had never seen a gathering quite like this one. Military personnel from across the country had requested permission to attend, creating a sea of dress uniforms that stretched across the base's main parade ground. As the ceremony began, something extraordinary happened that no one had planned or organized. Without any orders or coordination, Marines began forming up in perfect formation around the memorial site. First dozens, then hundreds, until 500 Marines stood at rigid attention in honor of their fallen comrade. The sight was breathtaking and deeply moving. These warriors, trained for combat and hardened by conflict, stood in perfect silence with tears streaming down their faces. Each one understood that they were witnessing something special, a tribute to a hero who had embodied everything they believed in about honor, courage, and commitment. General Patricia Hayes, the base commander, delivered the eulogy with a voice that carried across the assembled crowd despite her obvious emotion. She spoke of Maria's exceptional service record, her dedication to her fellow Marines, and the ultimate sacrifice she had made for people she would never know. Sergeant Rodriguez understood that freedom is not free, the general said, her words carrying the weight of absolute truth. She paid the price that liberty demands, not with reluctance or fear, but with the fierce joy of a warrior who had found her purpose. Today we don't just mourn her passing, We celebrate a life that burned brighter in 28 years than most lives do in twice that time. When the traditional 21-gun salute echoed across the base, grown men and women wept openly. The sound seemed to capture all the grief and pride and love that filled every heart present. As the final shot faded into silence, a lone bugler played taps with such haunting beauty that even the California wind seemed to still and listen. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Maria's mother was presented with the folded American flag. As Rosa Rodriguez accepted the flag that had covered her daughter's coffin, every single one of the 500 Marines saluted simultaneously. The precision was perfect, as if they had rehearsed it for months. But it was entirely spontaneous, born from a shared understanding of what they had lost. The presentation of Maria's posthumous Medal of Honor came directly from the president, who had flown to California specifically to honor her sacrifice. In his remarks, he spoke of how her story had moved the entire nation and reminded Americans of the debt they owed to those who served in harm's way. Sergeant Rodriguez represents the very best of America, the president said as he placed the medal in Rosa's trembling hands. Her courage in the face of overwhelming odds, her willingness to sacrifice everything for others, and her unwavering commitment to her duty remind us all what heroism truly looks like. As the ceremony concluded, the 500 Marines remained at attention until Maria's family had departed. Only then did they break formation, but none left immediately. They stood in small groups, sharing memories of their fallen sister and drawing strength from each other's presence. James Mitchell, who had served beside Maria for 2 years, spoke for many when he addressed the gathering in an impromptu speech that came from his heart. Maria always told us that we were not just Marines. We were guardians, he said, his voice strong despite his tears. She said our job was to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them, no matter what it cost us. Today we learned what that really means. Today we learned what it means to be worthy of the title she died defending. The legacy of Sergeant Maria Rodriguez lived on in the hearts of every person who witnessed her final act of heroism. Her story became required reading at military academies. Her photograph hung in the halls of honor at Camp Pendleton, and her example inspired a new generation of warriors to serve with the same courage and dedication that had defined her life. But perhaps most importantly, the civilians she died to save lived to tell their children about the American Marine who gave her life for strangers in a foreign land. Her sacrifice had meaning that extended far beyond military glory. It represented the very best of human nature, the willingness to give everything for others without expectation of reward or recognition. The 500 Marines who stood in silent salute that day carried her memory with them wherever they served, ensuring that the spirit of Maria Rodriguez would never truly die, but would continue to inspire acts of heroism for generations to come.